Hello and welcome to another evening of frank conversation here on Hard Copy, coming to you from our studios in Abuja. I'm Maokpe Ogun Yusuf. Plateau State, north-central Nigeria, has as its appellation home of peace and tourism. But decades ago, when peace was shattered on the plateau through ethno-religious conflict, it's been a tortuous journey to restore the tranquil and order which were the selling point of the highland state. On Monday this week, the governor of the state made a statewide broadcast, and these were the highlights of the speech he gave.
My dear citizens of Plateau State, it is with a heavy heart that I address you today over the security situation in Plateau State. Events of the recent past have cast a dark shadow on the progress and the huge investments we have made in peace building and crime fighting within the last 6 years. Due to the recent attacks in Jos North, Bassa, Priom, and Barikin Ladi, we have witnessed the unfortunate disruption to the peace and security of the state by criminal elements, leading to the loss of innocent lives, properties, farm crops, and livestock. Despite the directive to security agencies to stop the attacks, arrest perpetrators, and bring them to justice, these attacks continued with the incident in Rukuba Road, where commuters were attacked, leading to other deaths and destruction. The constant threat to lives and properties necessitated the imposition of curfew on Jos North, Bassa, and Jos South local government areas to enable security agencies properly deploy to handle the situation and stop further breakdown of law and order. At this point, I wish to commiserate with the entire citizens of the state over these sad developments. I particularly extend my deep condolences to the families of those who lost their loved ones, as well as those who sustained injuries and lost properties during the carnage. I have directed that government pays the medical bills of those who are receiving treatment in various health facilities. As a result of these occurrences, I convened a high-level stakeholders meeting where traditional, political, community, and religious leaders gathered to brainstorm on how to bring an end to this cycle of violence. Thereafter, I held separate meetings with the leaders of Irigweland as well as Fulani community to further engage them on lasting solutions to the protracted conflict within the area. It is important to state that we have had several engagements with them in the past and made efforts to ensure that peace prevails in the area. Between January and July this year, the Plateau Peace Building Agency has conducted over 34 mediation engagements at community levels in Miango, Kwal, Dusemkura, and Gelobari districts of Bassa local government. In response to these attacks, I also held meetings with the Plateau Interreligious Councils and directed them along with the Peace Building Agency to swing into action by carrying out more consultations and engagements to diffuse tensions, calm nerves, and dig deep into the immediate and remote causes of these conflicts with a view to bringing the ugly situation to an end.
As the governor did highlight, there have been efforts in the last couple of years to establish and consolidate the peace in the state through the establishment of a peace-building agency created to break the cycle of violence on the plateau. The agency's mandate is to promote the culture of peace and harmonious existence among the various ethno-religious divides in the state. But with the events of the last couple of weeks, there have been questions as to whether peace wouldn't remain elusive to the home of peace and tourism. Tonight on Hard Copy, I speak with the Director General of the Peace Building Agency, Joseph Lengmang, on the events of the last few weeks and what it would take to restore true peace to the plateau. The last couple of weeks must have been very trying for you at the Peace Building Agency. How has the crisis hit you, the current crisis hit you and your agency on the plateau?
Well, I would say I mean, we're hit quite hard because of the amount of investment we've made in the post-conflict peace building process within the last 5 years. And to see all of that, tumbling down right before us, I mean, it's not really a very pleasant experience. You've put in so much, yet, you thought you were making some progress, but you realize that, I mean, your effort isn't good enough. So it's very sad, very unfortunate. Very discouraging, but we really do not despair regardless, because like any society that is emerging from the throes of war, I mean, the likelihood or the risk of a relapse or of a recurrence is usually very high. And that is, of course, what we saw, unfortunately so.
Did you have warning signs? Were there any indications that this was going to happen on the plateau?
Yeah, I mean, there hasn't been any shortage of early warning. There hasn't been any shortage of it or intelligence. Usually, the challenge is with the response, component of that system. And of course, that speaks to a wide range of issues with the security agencies and all that. Our role, basically, I mean, the Peace Building Agency is not a security agency. The best we can is to share, early warning across and to also share intelligence. All the signs were there, no doubt about that. But how all of these things overwhelmed virtually everyone, including the security agencies, is something that remains inexplicable for now, for us, perhaps, but it's a reality that, of course, we thought some quiet has returned within the last 5-6 years because of the governance approach of the governor. I mean, of course, peace and security is the first, policy thrust of his administration. So much investment into proactive kind of conflict prevention and peace building. Yet, this seems to amount to nothing. Of course, like I've said earlier on, there are so many issues that we might want to look at if we are to interrogate that.
Well, can you share with us some of the signs which you saw when you talk about early warning signals?
Yeah, the mauling of farmlands, the ripening of crops, and attack and counter-attacks here and there across about 4 local governments within the last 3-4 months. I mean, it's a sufficient sign. And we've had series of meetings, even as a peace building agency, saddled with the responsibility of working with a wide range of stakeholders to douse tension and to also collaborate, with the security agencies. We've had such engagements over and over. But again, that amounted to nothing. I mean, we saw what we saw. I mean, a kind of a relapse into violent conflict, into attacks and all that. So the signs were there, no doubt about it.
What would you hold responsible for the collapse of peace in Plateau State?
I mean, just like it is difficult to really pinpoint at one single, variable or factor, providing sufficient explanation as to why we have this kind of incidents. I think there are quite a number of issues. Number one, and we've been warning about this over the years, that so long as the underlying issues of conflict have not been resolved, nobody should overrule the possibility of a recurrence. Number two, as much as the government itself is determined to consolidate on the gains it has recorded within the last 5-6 years of the Lalong administration, there are people, I mean, some set of people out there who are equally as determined as the government to bring down the roof upon everybody's head. And that's a reality for whatever reason, for a variety of reasons, some for pecuniary reasons, some for political reasons and all that. Right? And of course, the legacies of over nearly 2 decades of violence that has left, a deep scar in our hearts and the hearts of many communities have not been treated. And so long as these wounds have not been treated, we couldn't, overrule the possibility of this kind of thing. It's just that the scale that we have seen, the relapse and the recurrence, it's one that is really mind-boggling. I mean, the senseless killing or attacks on sleepy communities and women and children being killed in cold blood, and those horrific images we see really breaks one's heart so much that, of course, looking from where we were coming, and we thought we've learned lessons, we thought we have evolved, only to be caught up in these kind of a scenario again and again. I mean, it's really, really heartbreaking.
You've spoken to underlying issues, and you've also referred to scars. A number of people believe that these also tie in with justice. to your mind, I'm sure when you've had conversations, peace-building conversations, talks of justice must have come up as well. For the people on the plateau and the people whom you've spoken to in your mediation efforts, what is the definition of justice to them? What would justice mean for them?
Well, I mean, justice, it depends on who you talk to, right? I mean, both the Fulanese on the one hand, for example, and the natives, everyone seems to have hold tenaciously to his or her own version of the truth. Because truth basically leads to justice, all things being equal. So for the Fulani, he sees the native as the aggressor. So also the native sees the Fulani as the aggressor. There is this sense of victimhood, and it makes it very difficult to be able to say, whose justice? Of course, justice for everyone, but what kind of justice? As a peace-building agency, our own responsibility begins and ends with, working with ordinary communities to do extraordinary fit for peace, through forgiveness, through healing, through reconciliation and all that. Of course, that is another form of justice, restorative justice, where both parties, agree and understand that, look, we've done wrong to one another in the past, and there's a need for us to forgive the past in order to reconcile the future, or perhaps to be able to forge a new kind of a social compact going forward. But again, there is also the legalistic framework, where, of course, the retributive kind of justice, where the peace-building agency lacks the competence, basically, to pursue that kind of justice. But of course, our ideas and from our experience working with communities, I mean, we try even advising governments, whether at the subnational level or at the national level, to strike a balance between the legal framework and also the restorative framework. All of them must be pursued simultaneously if we are to deal with issues of conflict, to deal with the vestiges and the legacies, and if we are to usher in a new period of peace, of stability, based on our shared and common humanity as opposed to any other consideration.
So would you say that you were not given a foundation upon which to work? Because, I mean, as you rightly pointed out, it would seem that your work in the last 6 years or thereabout has gone to waste.
No, I wouldn't say it has gone to waste. Perhaps, if not because of what we have put into the process, maybe the situation would have been worse. I wouldn't say that the peace-building process has collapsed entirely. I don't think so. There are people, I mean, we have empirical evidence of people who were merchants of death, who were perpetrators of violent conflicts, and on account of our encounter with them, they've been able to transform into agents of peace, and are working assiduously in different communities, hand in gloves to the peace-building agency and other non-state actors who are also working in or around issues of conflict prevention and peace-building agents and peace-building processes in Plateau State. They give us hope. And the fact that we have a relapse doesn't mean that there is a complete collapse of the entire process. No, it's a challenge. And I think it poses a significant kind of a challenge, not only to government, but to everybody who is a lover of peace. Traditional institutions, religious institutions, and of course, civil society organizations, the media, and all of that. I mean, it's some kind of a compact that we need to really build. I mean, focusing on the gains we have recorded yesterday and not getting, not relenting in giving in our best in order to push through the frontiers of peace. So there is a lot that we have to do. Of course, it tells us there is a lot of work that needs to do, addressing the underlying causes of conflict and managing the situation, working closely, of course, with the security agencies to deal with the systemic issues, the response component of the early warning system that we have in the state and all that. It's a big challenge, but I think it is one that we can truly, overcome if we are very sincere and honest and well coordinated in pushing the process forward.
Welcome back. You're watching Hard Copy, coming to you from our studios in Abuja. Joseph Lengmang, the Director General of the Plateau State Peace Building Agency, is our guest tonight. And we're speaking on what it would take to restore lasting and sustainable peace to Plateau State. Well, sincerity and honesty right now seems to be in short supply, especially when you consider what has happened. And I'm happy that despite all that has happened, your optimism has not been dampened in terms of the work that you have to do. But how big would you say the role of the legal system is in all of this? Because a number of people believe that it is because there's been no consequence. I mean, all of this happens, and rather than talk about bringing people to book and bringing people to justice, there's just talk around, let us build peace. And people think that that sort of peace is not going to be sustainable on the long run. Do you agree with them?
Well, I talked about pursuing the legal justice and the restorative justice simultaneously. If you focus on the legal justice alone and at the detriment of the restorative justice, at the end of the day, you stand the risk of creating another conflict or creating another problem. Yes, I agree that people who have been caught, fished out and have been proven by our legal system that they have done wrong to a community needs to be punished. Of course, on the other hand, looking at the complex nature of the issues that we've been dealing with for the last 2 decades, there is also a component or a dimension of it that has to do with working towards a win-win for everybody. Because if you don't have that win-win for everybody and you focus only on the legal, outcome, you may not be able to contain what comes in the future. And so, if you recall, the most important policy thrust of the long administration, the governor of Plateau State, is peace, security, and good governance. Everybody knows that from the onset. He came in, he set up a committee, because when he came, he basically inherited a near chaotic social security environment. And he worked very hard to change the mindset and change the approach of successive administrations in the past, which hasn't yielded the kind of result we wanted to see in terms of sustainability. So he brought this committee, set up this committee, Fulani and Bureau, and they worked together very closely, came up with 5 written recommendations, one of which is the setting up of the Plateau State Peace Building Agency. And our mandate essentially is to work, like I've said earlier on, with a wide range of stakeholders to ensure the harmonious coexistence of all the ethno-religious groups that make up this state. Our role essentially is to also resolve all conflicts, prevent new ones from happening, and to also promote a very stable and a secure community. But of course, we have never lived under the illusion that our success depends on our work alone. There are so many other components, and how we weave all of that together, I think, what guarantees or determines success in these regards. So it is difficult, really, to strike a balance between all of these things, because we couldn't just look at this thing only at the subnational level. There is a national, component, a dimension to it. There is equally, in some cases, even sub-regional, dimensions to it. And so it's a whole lot of a framework that we have to pursue in a very coherent fashion, and the commitment and the political will that is required, whether at the level of the state or national level, needs to be brought to bear. And the role of traditional institutions and religious institutions is also key to determining success.
When I started this interview, I asked you about how this has hit your agency, and you did say that it has hit you quite bad, because it does look like the work that you have been doing in the last couple of years has amounted to nothing. And, it's a very vital question, because the reason why you were set up was to prevent this sort of conflicts, to predict them somewhat, and you say that there were numerous warning signals. However, despite the warning signals, despite all that, all the intelligence that had come through, somehow, the agencies, the security agencies, weren't able to prevent people dying, and have not been able to prevent a situation whereby a curfew has had to be imposed again on Plateau State. I don't know what you make of this. What would you say it would take to break the cycle of violence in Plateau State?
One, again, like I've hinted earlier, is the sincerity of purpose. Really, you couldn't build any form of sustainable peace.
On whose part?
On everybody's part. It's not just a question of government imposing peace or, reeling out policies and implementing policies that leads to peace. It's about the ordinary stakeholder out there, or the conflict parties themselves, being honest with the process. And I'm speaking from experience.
So what do you think, in your experience, from the conversations that you have had, who do you think is not pulling their weight? Who do you think lacks sincerity in the conversations that you have had so far?
Well, talking about the conflict parties, I think all of them. Really, sometimes you bring them here on the table and they say one thing and they go out and they do something totally different. I am not too sure that there is there is sincerity and honesty underlying the process. And that explains just one intervening variable, to explain to you. But that is not to say that there are no other elements that are acting on the equation that are also producing the kind of effect that we are seeing today. When we say security agencies, and I keep telling people, really, that there are gaps. Truly, there are gaps. They are doing their very best. The reality is that their best isn't enough, as evident by what we have seen out there. And dealing with the security component of it, it's very key to determining the success of our work as well, because we are no security agencies. Our work basically is to foster peace or craft peace by, fostering mutual understanding and cooperation between people, to see beyond, just their ethnic or religious or even political interests in that respect. And that is why I talked about our shared and common humanity being a very important denominator for, building a consensus around these issues of conflict that are very complex.
Let me quickly take you to the attack that happened recently. The reprisal attack that was carried out on travelers going through the state. Now, I'm wondering, for an agency like yours, and if you were to mediate in that sort of situation and to calm frayed nerves, would your mandate extend outside of your state?
No, actually it doesn't. Plateau State is a state, and we have our frontiers, our boundaries, and except if we have to go on some kind of an advocacy, yes. I think we can go to do advocacy anywhere, even outside the shores of this country. That would be helpful to in dousing tension and building the kind of understanding that is required to transform the very conditions that engender the conflict in the first place. We've been doing that actually because yeah.
How big a role would you say that the upcoming, because there are those who say that, it's been easy to keep the pace in the last couple of years because there's been one governor in place who's had a second term, but that now 2023 is approaching and they think that there are elements of politics in all of this. Do you agree with them?
I agree with it, absolutely. The more we get closer to elections, it seems as if people are willing to bring down the roof upon everybody's head for, for whatever political reasons they have. Perhaps it gives them some kind of a vantage position to negotiate, or it serves as a chip to renegotiate or whatever, the political space. It's very clear. But again, it is only one variable. I wouldn't say this is the only thing that is, contributing to this instability. I think it goes far beyond that. And that is the reason why we're advocating that if there is a need for a framework to deal with this issue, to break this conflict trap, it has to be comprehensive. And every segment of the society, every component of the security governance framework needs to be squarely addressed effectively to be able to deliver on the promise of peace and security in a sustainable way.
Is it a problem that you think Plateau can solve alone?
I don't think so. And that's the reason why I talked about the national dimension. The governor of Plateau State, for example, despite his commitment, everybody knows him as a very peaceful governor, even by nature, has done so much in terms of policy beyond the question of the peace building agency. He has set up other agencies to support post-conflict, rehabilitation, reintegration, and resettlement. And it's been working very perfectly well. But again, at the end of the day, the governor is only a chief executive of Plateau State as far as, the provision of the public goods is concerned on the one hand. But when it comes to the provision of security provisioning to a vast majority of citizens, he's only the chief security officer, I think, on paper, really, because he doesn't command troops, he doesn't command the police, he doesn't command of course, there is some synergy and understanding, which, of course, has helped significantly within the last 5 years for him to be able to achieve the feat he has made as far as peace and security is concerned.
So until that happens, you don't think until he commands a troop, until he commands a police, that is never going to happen? Peace might never be achieved in Plateau State?
Well, that is relative. I'm just trying to outline some of the difficulties, challenges that we have that we need to deal with. And that speaks largely to a national conversation that is ongoing. Those who are for community policing or those who are for state policing and all that. It's a problem, it's a systemic problem that we have to address. And if we truly want to, improve on our security and to make sure that we nip all of these things in the bud, then we have to interrogate that question.
Mr. Lengmang, thank you for coming on Hard Copy.
Thank you so much for having me.
Conversations around restoring peace to the Plateau should be something that concerns us all, because for those who know, being able to restore lasting peace to a state like Plateau could provide a template to solving the pockets of crisis bedeviling the country, bordering mostly on ethnic and religious considerations. So do share your thoughts with us on your impressions of conflict on the Plateau and what must be done to restore normalcy back to the home of peace and tourism. Please use the handles showing on your screen. Thank you for watching tonight. I'm Maokpa Ogun Yusuf. Good night.